World War III has officially begun.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess we're at World War III. I don't know. I guess.
I have said to you guys before, I'm going to keep you updated on this thing to see where this is headed. Reading into it, looking at the Bible, looking at the spirit of prophecy, looking at Revelation, and see how these things fit. This is a serious issue that is happening now. This is pushing us into World War III. And this ex-stock general of Ukraine making that statement says a whole lot as well. Before we get into this, I want to first read to you what the Bible says in the book of Luke, chapter 17. And as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be also in the days of the Son of Man. What happened during that time? They ate, they drank, they married wives, and they were given in marriage until the days of Noah entered into the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. The Bible says it is the same way it's going to be when the Son of Man is returned. Matthew chapter 24 confirms this. Matthew 24:39 adds it this way. They knew not. What was their issue in the days of Noah? They didn't know that the flood was gonna come. So is it because God didn't warn them? He did, but they ignored the warning. We are told because they ignored the warning, they were not ready when the flood came. And what happened as a result? The flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. And the point is, in the days of Noah, people were busy. They were not paying attention. There was a lot going on. They were highly distracted. They were living their lives. They were not concerned with the end times. They were not aware that probation was about to close. And we are told also in Genesis chapter 6, talking about the days of Noah, what condition were things? God saw that the wickedness of men was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Bible says, as it was in the days of Noah, is the same way it's going to be. And one of the issues that happened during the time in the days of Noah, God gave them 120 years to get their act together. But we knew that the time spent had come and gone, and the people were unrepentant, and then the flood came and took them all the way. The Bible says also in the days of Noah, there was violence in the land. Yes, men were drunken with violence and wickedness. It was the order of the day. But also in the book of Matthew chapter 24, what the Bible tells us that in the last days, the love of many is going to wax cold. Because of iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. We are in that time today. And I think when you look at what's happening in the political spectrum behind this war, was behind the military industrial complex and the powers that be who are making this happen, you can see the wickedness of men on display, somebody. So look what's going on here. Ukraine is now holding emergency meeting on Russia new missile targeting Ukraine. So as a result of this war, the Ukrainians now are meeting with NATO, holding emergency meeting because they feel like World War III is about to break out. How did we get here? First, let's go back to this article once again. And this is the Ukraine general who's speaking here. I believe that in 2024, we can absolutely believe that the Third World War has begun, said Zelensky, who is the Ukraine envoy to the United Kingdom, during a speech at Ukraine's Prophesy UP 100 award ceremony. Because in 2024, Ukraine is no longer facing Russia. Soldiers from the North Korea are standing in front of Ukraine. Let's be honest, already in Ukraine, the Iranians, Shaheeds, are killing civilians absolutely openly without any shame, said Zelensky, adding to the North Korean and Chinese weapons of fighting into are flying into Ukraine. This is what he is saying. And NATO now is meeting with Ukraine to hold a meeting. How did this happen? We already had 2 videos about this.
Just a day after the US finally gave permission for Ukraine to fire American long-range missiles into Russia, Kyiv has done so. Its attack on a target within Russia's recognized territorial borders was confirmed by both Moscow and by officials in Washington. The change in US policy comes at a critical time, with the Biden administration due to give way to that of Donald Trump in January. Moscow says the strike hit the Bryansk region this morning. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said that they will react accordingly. Today marks 1,000 days since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And this latest development is being watched very carefully by world leaders at the G20 summit in Brazil. More on that in a moment. But first, our Russia editor Steve Rosenberg has this report from Moscow.
Breaking news on Russian TV. Claims that Ukraine had fired 6 American ATACMS missiles into Russia's Bryansk region, though no reports of casualties. The response from Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, said the missile attack was a signal that the West wants to escalate the conflict. But is this escalation by Russia? Published today, a Kremlin decree lowering the nuclear threshold. Russia now reserving the right to go nuclear even if attacked by conventional weapons, if such an attack threatens Russia's sovereignty or territorial integrity. President Putin had promised changes to the nuclear doctrine weeks ago, a clear signal to Europe and America not to let Ukraine strike Russia with long-range missiles. Then, an even clearer signal. Russian nuclear exercises, a warning to the West not to cross Russia's red lines. But the key question, in Russia's war on Ukraine, would Vladimir Putin use a nuclear weapon?
I think it's quite serious, because even Putin doesn't know whether he can use nukes or he can't. It depends on his emotions. We know that he's a very emotional man, and the decision to begin this war was also an emotional step.
The lowering of the nuclear threshold does not mean that Vladimir Putin is about to press the nuclear button. These changes are designed, I think, at the very least, to put pressure on Western leaders who will now have to decide, is Putin bluffing or not?
President Putin has amended Russia's nuclear doctrine today to imply that if American weapons are used against Russian territory, which they now have been, that means that he is potentially in a nuclear confrontation with the United States. So what does that all mean? Well, the Russians have got a lot of nuclear weapons, 5,500 nuclear warheads, and it's more than the Americans have got, but they've got several thousand as well. What's more important is what are they deployed on? The Russians have got them deployed, about 1,700 of them, and again, that's only about 200 more than the United States. And they have them on a triad of land-based ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, ballistic missile-firing submarines, and aircraft that can launch cruise missiles or whatever with nuclear warheads. So they've got about 1,700 deployed, and again, the United States is only about 150 behind that. Both sides have so many nuclear weapons they could destroy each other several times over. The land-based ICBMs are the most interesting and the most potent. And if we look at where they are, and we're looking at Russia here, but remember, this is always a mirror image. The Americans have got everything more or less the same as Russia. Their ICBM bases are in Russia, and those ICBMs would fly, if necessary, to America. Now, they won't go over the United Kingdom, because if this was a globe, they would go over the North Pole. As indeed, American weapons from bases in Northern America would go over Canada, over the North Pole, into Russia. It takes about 20 minutes, and that's the time that one side would have to react to the other. And if we think about the ranges of these things, if we assume Moscow as a starting point, which it isn't because these bases are elsewhere, but if you just think of it, the range is about 6,000 miles. It can reach the big long-range weapons can reach everywhere. And if we're talking about ballistic missile submarines, it could be in the Norwegian Sea, it could be in the Bering Sea, it might even be in the Atlantic. So potentially, Russia and America can reach each other, the whole continent, anywhere, at any time, more or less, in the world. That's what they've got. Now, the point about all of this is that this is the way it was in the mid-1970s, and it hasn't changed. Technically, it hasn't changed for 50 years. They've modernized their forces, but they're still basically structured in this way. What has changed is that the arms control regime that built up in the 1960s was quite powerful. That regime has been whittled away and is almost now non-existent. And so the arms control agreements that used to build predictability into all of this have now more or less disappeared. And that's what makes President Putin's statements more reckless these days than they were, say, a year ago.
It's also been reported that Russia started mass producing mobile nuclear bunkers capable of housing thousands and protecting against shock waves and radiations as Putin lowered threshold for launching nukes. Are you hearing this? Are you hearing this? This is what they look like. This is what these supposed mobile nuclear bunkers look like. Yep, that's what they look like. You think these guys are playing? No, I don't think they're playing. I don't think they're playing, friends. Yes, they're beginning to build those and station those for their people because they feel the need that they might have to use nuclear weapons. So this is Kim Iverson. You know, I was listening to her earlier today. She is distraught, man, because she now realizes, for real, we are at war.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess we're at World War III. I don't know. I guess this is what they wanted. Why in the world would they do this to us? Why in the world would they escalate this? This was such an easy conflict to solve, like all of them, by the way, lately. We're just led by madmen. The country is run by lunatics. And they're all greedy lunatics, bought off, greedy lunatics, selling the country and the soul of the country and the bodies of our young people, just selling them off to multinational corporations and military-industrial complex, all in the effort to make boatloads of cash. So I guess that's where we're at with this. Geez. What do you think? I'd love to hear from you. Do you think we're at World War III now? I mean, I think the Ukrainian former commander-in-chief has made a good case, albeit he didn't, he ignored the NATO side of it. But when you add it all up, I guess we are. I guess maybe it could be, like he said, it could be turned around. We could turn it around, but are they going to? And will Trump turn it around? Or are they going to escalate this just before Trump takes office? Because, Democrats would love nothing more but to hand Trump a disaster. Oh, they would love it.
The Biden administration apparently giving this approval for Ukraine to use long-range missiles to strike against Russia. After the election, which, of course, we know Kamala Harris lost, the Democrats lost in a landslide. Do you think this is retribution? It seems like it would be especially evil to risk an escalation in the war and to risk so many lives just to get back at your political opponent.
Well, let's begin with this. These kinds of strikes don't happen overnight, right? Not to mention that ATACMS have to be moved into place. They have to be loaded onto either an MLRS, which can fire 2 ATACMS, or a HIMARS platform that can fire 1 ATACMS. So you have to have a facility that can actually load the missiles. So you need a crane. You need to get the launchers as close as possible to the border without being detected and wiped out in the process. So that's the first part. Second part, Ukraine didn't fire these, and we shouldn't say that. This was fired by America, by the U.S. military, from beginning to end. The missiles are produced by the U.S., they're shipped by the U.S., they're loaded in by the U.S. The HIMARS are crewed by American Mercs. The missiles are fired by American Mercs. They're guided in by American satellites and a control center that's in the U.S. This is from start to end, the U.S. military attacking Russia. One thing in the zone, it was bad enough when it was in the zone of conflict. Now it's going into into pre-91, pre-2022 Russia. This is a direct attack by the U.S. military onto Russia.
And World War III, unfortunately, I think it was kind of on all of our bingo cards, right? We just were hoping it wouldn't get called. And yet here it is. The number's been called.
Testimony for the Church, Volume 9. We are told here in page 14, paragraph 2, the world is stirred with the spirit of war. The prophecy of the 11th chapter of Daniel has nearly reached its complete fulfillment. Soon the scenes of trouble spoken of in the prophecies will take place. Daniel chapter 11 is happening right before our eyes. So in the midst of all these conflicts, and again, the U.S., the Biden administration just announced another $275 million weapon package to Ukraine amid call to loosen limits. Yes, more money is being funded to Ukraine for more bloodshed.
As we're working to make sure that Ukraine has what it needs to effectively defend itself, the United States continues to step up. We've obligated just recently and pushed out the door another $8 billion in security assistance for Ukraine. That was in September. Another almost $500 million just a few weeks ago. And President Biden is committed to making sure that every dollar we have at our disposal will be pushed out the door between now and January 20th.
The post came from Chase Bose or Bose. He says, while the idiot Biden gives another $4.6 billion of U.S. taxpayer cash away to a dictator in Ukraine and allows them to start World War III, here is North Carolina, U.S. on the same day. He needs to be impeached. That is indeed something to consider. That is indeed something to consider. So in this video, we have Tucker Carlson, who was interviewing Vladimir Putin. It happened
thousands of miles.
And listen to what this man said. Why is it that the United States is so invested in Ukraine when you got other issues in your own countries that you can't even fix?
Do the United States need this? What for? Thousands of miles away from your national territory. Don't you have anything better to do? You have issues on the border, issues with migration, issues with the national debt, more than $33 trillion. You have nothing better to do, so you should fight in Ukraine? Wouldn't it be better to negotiate with Russia? Make an agreement, already understanding the situation that is developing today?
Now, this next video is also posted by Dmitry Medvedev. If you don't know who he is, here is his profile, big name, Deputy Chair of the Security Council of Russian Federation, the third president of Russia, 2008 to 2012. 4 tweets in Russia follow. So this was the third president of Russia, who is deputy chair of Security Council. This he posted. It says this: that's what you wanted? Well, you are blank. Well, got it. A hypersonic ballistic missile attack. This is what this thing looks like. This is what Putin has sent over as a warning, because there was no nukes in it. There was no nuclear warhead attached to it. Thank God. Now, listen, this is what it looks like. Look at the speed of this thing. Faster than the speed of light, we are told. There is no way they can shoot these things down. This man said this here, and I want to read to you some of the responses from the people. This is Matt Koopman. So he is speaking here, founder and director of Aurelian Group, small tech going big with Zoho in Australia. The citizens of the world in a large majority want peace. War are started by governments for domestic power and motivations. Motivation shaped and cultivated by those that make their own gains financially and politically. Of wars, citizens do not get to choose. They only get to suffer. We choose peace. Our capacity government support arming Ukraine's while the people are not consulted. This is what he said. And the same is true for many. They do not want the war. This is Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, and he has a post today. And listen to what he said. Putin admitted to taking a second step in this war toward escalating and expanding this war. A new ballistic missile was used. Putin struck our city of Dnipro, one of the Ukraine's largest cities. This is a clear and severe escalation in the scale and brutality of this war.
How do you figure that Putin was the one who escalated this? You literally lobbed ATACMS missiles at Russia. Did you think they weren't going to respond? Of course you knew they were going to respond. But he says today, Putin admitted to taking a second step this year toward escalating and expanding this war. A new ballistic missile was used. Right, well, you used one on him. Putin struck our city of Dnipro, one of Ukraine's largest cities. This is a clear and severe escalation in the scale and brutality of this war. A cynical violation of the UN Charter by Russia. Let me emphasize, this is already Russia's second step toward escalation this year. The first was involving North Korea in the war against Ukraine with a contingent of at least 11,000 soldiers. What is he talking? What about all of the NATO troops? What about using NATO troops or American soldiers in order to fire off these ATACMS weapons into Russia? How do you have such cognitive dissonance on this? What in the world?
And a number of people disagreed with him. One said, you sent an American missile into Russia. Did you think Putin will bake you a cake? You escalated it. And he responded. So I want to play this video that's going to give you an idea of why this thing is. And the individual we're going to be talking about here, Jeffrey D. Sachs, he is the American economist and public policy analyst, who is a professor at Columbia University. So the man has served in his region for a while. He knows his stuff. And I want to play this video from him because he is going to put things in perspective. For those of you who want to know how this war came about, the history behind this and everything, is good to take a listen to this video. Let's check it out.
Let me just explain in 2 minutes the Ukraine war. This is not an attack by Putin on Ukraine in the way that we are told every day. This started in 1990. James Baker III, our Secretary of State, said to Mikhail Gorbachev, NATO will not move 1 inch eastward if you agree to German unification. The U.S. then cheated on this, already starting in 1994, when Clinton signed off on a plan to expand NATO all the way to Ukraine. This is when the so-called neocons took power. The expansion of NATO started in 1999 with Poland, Hungary, and Czech Republic. Then the U.S. led the bombing of Serbia in 1999. That was a use of NATO to bomb a European capital, Belgrade, 78 straight days to break the country apart. The Russians didn't like that very much. But even Putin started out pro-European, pro-American, actually. He asked maybe we should join NATO, when there was still the idea of some kind of mutually respectful relationship. 9/11 came, then came Afghanistan, and the Russians said, yeah, we'll support you, we understand, to root out terror. In 2002, the United States unilaterally walked out of the anti-ballistic missile treaty. What it did was trigger the U.S. putting in missile systems in Eastern Europe that Russia views as a dire, direct threat to national security by making possible a decapitation strike of missiles that are a few minutes away from Moscow. In 2004-5, we engaged in a soft regime change operation in Ukraine, the so-called First Color Revolution. But in 2009, Yanukovych won the election, and he became president in 2010 on the basis of neutrality for Ukraine. So in February 22nd, 2014, the United States participated actively in the overthrow of Yanukovych. They intercepted a really ugly call between Victoria Nuland and the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Piat, who's a senior State Department official till today. And they talked about regime change. So they made the new government. The U.S. then said, okay, now NATO's really going to enlarge. And Putin kept saying, stop. You promised no NATO enlargement. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Bulgaria, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, 7 more countries in the not 1 inch eastward. On December 15th, 2021, Putin put on the table a draft Russia-U.S. security agreement. The basis of it is no NATO enlargement. The special military operation started, and 5 days later, Zelensky says, okay, neutrality. And then the United States and Britain said, no way. You guys fight on. We got your back. We don't have your front. You're all going to die. But we got your back. That's 600,000 deaths now of Ukrainians since Boris Johnson flew to Kyiv to tell them to be brave. Absolutely ghastly. We have to understand we're not dealing with, as we're told every day, with this madman like Hitler. This is complete bogus, fake history that is a purely PR narrative of the U.S. government. We're playing games here. So, God forbid a nuclear power comes at us. I don't know what's going to happen. But we came at them.
I think they're capable of wanting to trigger a war with Russia in order to sustain their interests and force Trump's hand before he comes into office.
I think you're absolutely right. Rick, I get you to comment there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree, and it's to their benefit. The chaos benefits them. I mean, if Trump's going to go in and clean house, and we're going to have the revolution that we all pray is coming, and that to everybody else's point earlier, that the people are ready for. They haven't gone to sleep after the election like they usually do. We're usually having to try to get them back involved. They're all saying press the gas. So if that revolution is going to come, because we're watching, including those Republicans, like we talked about last night, they have to do anything and everything they can to disrupt the system. And to Lance's point, I think it was just last week, maybe 10 days ago, that Biden was bragging about funneling another, if I remember right, it was $5 billion here and $8 billion there. I mean, to Ukraine. And it all, what they're trying to do is lock the United States into a worse and worse position. So I think it was maybe Hank that said, so it's harder for Trump to claw us back out of it. It's also setting up the negotiations between Zelensky and Putin, right? They're trying to get some additional ground gained so that when Trump comes in and says, all right, boys, get to the table, we're going to settle this thing and stop this nonsense, that Ukraine has a stronger position to negotiate from. So there are reasons they're doing all of this. And I guess when I said earlier, I felt like what's the big deal that we're adding? And I get what you're saying about now it's our missiles being used. But I guess I just feel like we've dug such a hole there that Trump's going to have to get us out of. Nothing's going to surprise me in what they're going to try to do between now and January 20th. But I think it is to make it difficult on his administration to be able to settle and actually have a reasonable negotiation he can get Putin to agree to.
Friends, we got to pray. We got to pray, and we got to stay busy and remain hopeful, because in the midst of all this confusion, God is at work. We are told, not all in this world has taken side with the enemy against God. Not all have become disloyal. There are a faithful few who are true to God. For John's right, here are they who keep the commandments of God in the faith of Jesus. Soon, the battle will be waged fiercely against those who serve God and those who serve him not. Soon, everything that can be shaken will be shaken. And those things that cannot be shaken may remain.
We are now this close to a nuclear war. Russia has sent an ICBM. It's a nuclear-capable missile. They've sent it in to Ukraine. This is in response to American missiles flying into Russia. Joe Biden approved this. He couldn't run a presidential campaign, but he can approve to put America at the doorstep of nuclear war. This is where we are, my friends. The military-industrial complex wants this. The warmongers want this. The neocons want this. America does not. I don't. We voted against war. We voted for Donald Trump. This has got to end.
In the face of all these confusions, atrocities, and commotions and wars, may the Lord help us to be faithful to duty, to his name, and to the truth. God bless you. I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one. Bye.